And we're going to look at, first of all, the Sedra. Right. So here we have Matot, the beginning. There's actually 2 parshiot this week, and we're just considering the beginning of the first parsha. Vayedaber Moshe el Roshei Matot. Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes, Livnei Israel, of the Jewish people, of the Israelites, Lemor, saying, Zeh hadavar shetzivah Hashem. This is what God has commanded. And then comes a whole thing, which we're not going to read, all about Ish ki yidor neder laHashem, if a person makes a vow to God, or he shava shvuah, or he makes an oath, le'asor isar al nafsho, to forbid himself from something. So, for example, a person might say, I'm not going to eat meat. He makes a vow. He's not going to eat meat. He's not going to drink wine. He's not going to do something or other. Something which is permitted by Torah. But he's decided he is not going to do that. He's going to make a vow restricting himself for some reason. Yes, usually he wants, it's an expression of piety in some cases. He might have had an accident with that thing. Like imagine if a person got very drunk and did something stupid, and then they say, right, he's making a vow, he's never going to drink wine again, or whiskey, or whatever it might be. So, lo yachel dvaro, he should not profane his words, as they put it here. He shouldn't break his pledge. He should do whatever has come out of his lips. And then it talks about a woman making a vow and so on. Now let's just see. I think that there's an interesting Rashi. So we're looking at this commentary. Now, okay, so Rashi actually tells us that when he spoke to the heads of the tribes, this doesn't mean he spoke only to the princes of the children of Israel, that's the heads of the tribes, and not to the people also, but that he showed respect to the princes by teaching them first, and afterwards he taught everyone. So that was the general method. But there's the question, what is the reason? What reason is there for scripture going out of its way to state it here? It could have said it anywhere. Because by specially stating that the laws about vows were taught in the first instance to the princes and afterwards to the Israelites, it intends to teach that the annulling of vows, to cancel a vow, is really to be affected by one person who is expert in the law. That means like a prince, like a leader of a tribe. And that only if there be no such expert, they can be annulled by 3 ordinary persons. So in other words, we've got the idea of making vows, and we've got the idea from Rashi that the reason why it says he spoke to the heads of the tribes, the princes, is because a distinguished individual, a scholar, a sage, has got the halachic power to annul a vow. So a person comes to this person and explains what circumstances they made the vow and how really they didn't realize this and that when they made the vow, and the person hums and haws, whatever. He says, all right, it's annulled. Yeah, it's mutter, you're allowed to do whatever it is. So, so that's So that's now, and if there's no distinguished person who is on that level, you can have 3 ordinary people. So nowadays, you would have 3 rabbonim. I've seen this take place a few times. The idea of a person having a vow annulled, and 3 rabbonim, and they have the vow annulled. So that is the beginning of this week's Sedra. Now, the end of last week's Sedra, it's worth comparing with this. What happens at the end of last week's Sedra, which is Pinchas, is a long section all about the offerings which are brought on the festivals. It goes through, it begins with Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and then it goes on all the festivals one by one. Pesach, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, everything, all the festivals, and finally Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret, which is Simchat Torah. And it says these are the all the offerings that have to be added, that have to be brought. And it says at the end, Eila ta'asu l'Hashem, this is what you should do for God, b'ma'adechem, on your festivals, offering all these offerings, levad min nidrechem v'nidvotechem, apart from your vows and the davot. Those are also free will offerings. These are not the official offerings. All the other offerings in this section are things that were offered on behalf of the entire Jewish people on a festival. But here it's speaking about personal offerings, and it's saying, so we're not mentioning that here. So this is in addition to your votive, right? Votive means the vowed offerings. Okay, so that is the that's the text, and it's based on this. And greetings, Rabbi Lou, very nice seeing you. Thank you very much for joining us. Now back in the UK, and hello Shlomo, that's nice seeing you. And Ruth, wonderful to see you. Thank you for coming. Now, so that is the text of the Torah, and the discourse, which we'll open in a minute, hopefully, is from 1966, Parshat Matot, actually Matot-Mas'ey, as our Shabbat is. And so that's what we're going to explore in a minute, with first of all the melody of the discourse, to help us get into the rhythm of what it means studying a Hasidic discourse. Oh ya 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 yo ya yo. Oh ya 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 yo ya yo. Oh yamba ya 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 yo ya yo. Oh yere ramba ho ye yamba ho. Oh ya yere ramba ya yambum. Ha yere ramba ya ya yum. Ha yere ramba ho ye yamba ho ya ya yere ramba. Oh ya 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 yamba. Oh ya ya ho ho. Right. Okay. So now we have to find Vayedaber Roshei Hamatot. I don't know why it's not opening. Sorry, I'm just trying to open this and I don't know why it's not opening. You know what? It might have opened behind everything. Let me just see. I don't know why it's doing this. Ah, right. Okay, it's opened about 20 times. So I'm not sure why I wasn't able to see it. So anyway, Baruch Hashem, we've got it now. And so we're just going to share the screen. And here we have it. Okay, so it's some little kink, which I don't know, some bad use of technology on my part. I'm sorry about that. Right, now, let's see if there's a way. Is it big enough to see? Because it's normally I try to make it a bit bigger, but it's not quite letting me.
There's a plus button on the middle of the screen, and you can press that and it'll zoom in.
There's a plus button.
Yeah, right, if you go up, and to the left, and then right next to the 1 of 6, to the left of that, there's a plus.
Now you see, I can't see.
Or you can pinch it out. You can pinch it out, the recipient. That's what it says on my phone.
I think that would be on the phone. You see,
I have a printed one anyway.
there is a, oh, 1 second. Ah, I've got it. I've got it.
Yeah.
Right, okay, good. No, because I had a, some kind of group of tools hiding this, but I've managed to move it. Okay, so let's try. Vayedaber Moshe Losheh Matot, right? Okay, it's reminding us. 1 second. Is this the right one? No, I've opened the wrong one. Sorry. Sorry. Oh. Ah, this is it. Right. Okay, so right. So here we have Shabbat Mattot-Masey, and it's our Shabbos Mevorchin HaChodesh Av, and it is said in 1966. Vayedaber Moshe Hoshea Matot B'nei Yisrael. Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes of the Jewish people, Lemor, saying, Zeh hadavar shetzivah Hashem. This is what God commanded. Ish ki yido neder, a person who makes a vow, as we read. But tzarich lahavin, now the discourse begins with a question. We have to understand, Mal klalut inyan hanadarim. What is the whole concept of vows? V'harei itam Yerushalmi, it says in the Talmud Yerushalmi, in Tractate Nadarim, Lo dayeka b'ma she'asra Torah. Isn't it enough for you what the Torah forbade? The Torah forbids us to eat non-kosher meat. It forbids us to eat milk and meat together. It forbids us to do this. It forbids us to do that. Why are you making an extra vow to say you're not going to eat something that is otherwise permitted, but you're going to say, no, no, it's forbidden. For me, it's forbidden. I've made a vow. Why should a person prohibit for himself a permitted thing? Now, what this discourse is really about, in a sort of general way, is the whole question of our relationship to the physical world. There's a physical world which includes all kinds of possible pleasures, delights of the flesh, as they put it. And then there's a person trying to live according to the Torah. The Torah gives us a lot of rules. But as Nachmanides points out, Ramban points out in Parshat Kedoshim, where it says you should be holy. He says, what does it mean you should be holy? A person could be naval b'roshut haTorah. A person could be extremely self-indulgent with the permission of the Torah. He could eat the most, he could stuff himself with the most delicious food and just be an absolute glutton. But it's all glut kosher, a glut kosher glutton, right? That's a possibility. Nachmanides points out. Historically, he was living in Spain at that point, and around 1240. And there were indeed, that was a problem in society. Spanish Jewish society had a lot of very rich Jews who indeed lived in a very indulgent way. You know, they could do that with all the food kosher, but still it was a problem. So he talks about the ideal of Kadesh atzmecha b'mutalecha. Sanctify yourself by not indulging in everything that's permitted. Now, this relates, it's not, this whole thing is not mentioned in the discourse, but this is really the theme of the discourse. The discourse is about our relationship with physicality. Is physicality in all different areas of life something that we are just able to embrace, or is it something where we need some kind of sense of carefulness about it? And the typical way of understanding what that care is in practical terms is the mitzvah, as the Ramban, Nachmanides puts it, sanctify yourself with that which is permitted. The discourse doesn't actually mention that phrase, but that's the subtext of what the discourse is about. Now then we have another question. Gam tzarich lavin. Did someone ask? Eve, you're asking something? No? Okay. Gam tzarich lavin. We also have to understand Lama nemra parsha zu l'roshei matot dafka. Why is this said specifically to the leaders of the tribes? Unlike all the other sections of the Torah where it just says that Moses said it to the Jewish people. Now, quoting Rashi, Rashi Peresh, Rashi explained, Chalak kavod lanasiim, he showed honor to the princes of the tribes, lelamdam tchila, to teach them first, and after that to the rest of the Jewish people. And Mosif, and he adds, how do we know that all the other commands were the same? We skipped over this in the Rashi, but it's there. Talmud Lomar, as it says, Aaron and all the leaders of the tribe came back to Moshe, and Moses spoke to them. And after that, the whole Jewish people, they came to Moshe, and he taught them as well. But we still have to understand, this is another point that Rashi explained that we did look at, Madua mashmi'a katuv inyan zeh. Why does the Torah explain this idea? Shechalak kavod lanesiim, that he expressed honor to the princes, lelamdam tchilah, by teaching them first. Why is it particularly here in Parshat Nedarim Dafta, in this section about vows, or beperush Rashi, and in Rashi it explains, Umar ra'a le'omra kan, why does he say it here? Lamed sha'hafarat nedarim beyachid. This teaches us that the annulment of vows is beyachid mumche, with one person who's a distinguished expert. So we have to understand, the Rebbe is saying, considering this, what is this teaching us? What's that telling us today? There's another point we have to understand. Bechai is a commentary on the Torah written in Judeo-Arabic, something like the 11th century in Spain. And he writes, why is it shenismecha Parshat Nedarim leParshat HaMoadot? Why is it that the section on vows is put next to the section on the festivals? So the section on vows in our Sedra is next to the festivals in last week's Sedra. Lefi, because shebesiyum Parshat Moadot, at the end of the section on the festivals, which we looked at, Nehemiah, it says, Eile ta'asu l'Hashem, this is what you should do for God, offering up these offerings, b'moadechem, on your festivals, levad mididrechem v'nidvotechem, apart from the things which you vow, the offerings which you vow to give. And at first sight, that's not understandable. Shahari klalut inyan ha'moadim, all the festive offerings, it's not that we don't vow the offerings which are brought on festivals. They are part of the rules of the Torah. And on the contrary, when it finishes telling us about the festivals, it says these are the offerings on the festivals, apart from the vows, which is something different. So the im kain, and so if so, ma'u hakesher v'shaychut, what is the connection shebein nedarim lemoadot, the connection between vows and the festivals? So to say that the connection is what it says apart from the vows, but the whole section about the festivals hasn't been about the vows. That's the whole thing. So why is the section of the festivals straight before the thing about vows? All right, those are the basic questions. And now we come to the discussion or the presentation of a deeper dimension of understanding what the whole of life is about, why God created the world. And in terms of that, we will hopefully be able to understand the answers to these questions that have been raised. At this point, are there any questions on what we've said so far? Any questions? Oh, and this is Yisraela. Nachon?
Yes, hi.
Hi, okay, lovely seeing you. Okay, at least your phone. Right, okay, beautiful. So any questions from anyone else? Shana, nice seeing you. Okay.
That's all great. Thank you. All understood.
Lovely. Okay. So let's go further with our permission. By Inyanhu. Now the subject is as follows. Lihine Yadua, now it's known. Shenitava HaKadosh Baruch Hu liot lo dira b'tachtonim. God desired to have a dwelling in the lower world. Now, this statement appears in the Midrash. There are several collections of Midrash. People might have heard of Midrash Rabbah. This is Midrash Tanchuma, and it's in Parshat Naso, and it's a statement in the Midrash which became very, very central in Chabad thought. It's quoted in Tanya, and it is referred to many times, and it's a way it provides us with a very general and important way of understanding the whole purpose of creation and what the different challenges that face us are and why we are here and what we're trying to do. God desired to have a dwelling in the lower world. V'hainu, that means, shekavanahi, the divine intention is, shetia hadira lemata dafka. God should have a dwelling below. Now, what do you mean below? God is beyond the distinction of up and down and east and west. God is everywhere. Below means a realm where God is hidden. And we, our Olam Hazeh, this world that we are in, is a realm where, for the most part, God is hidden. Now, you do have spiritual individuals who lift up their eyes to the stars in the sky, and with Isaiah, they say, lift up your eyes to the heights. See God who created these. So in other words, or you might look at a beautiful mountain, or look down a microscope at a crystal or something, or a hair, looking at the cells in a human hair. It's amazing. Everything is amazing. And it's amazing because God created everything. So a person could feel that closeness to God just simply by looking at the world around them. And indeed, the Rambam says that's exactly what we should do. We should look at the world around us and be inspired by it. The fact that God is keeping everything running. You see godliness in everything, in the movement of the stars and the planets. It's just an amazing thing. But not everyone does that. And many people, in fact, take nature as a kind of rival to God. Oh, it's not a miracle, it's just nature. There's nothing special, that's just nature. It all happened by chance, etc. Dear Darwin. Now, so God wants a world where godliness is concealed, where he's not necessarily apparent. But in that world, he wants us, and he created human beings, and the human being has the task to discover God. And we, the Jewish people, have a particular role in that to help everyone discover God. So that's that's why the places where we see godliness, like Jerusalem, are claimed by everyone else in the world, or many other people, because that's where godliness is apparent, and so that's something which has impressed other people as well, not necessarily in the best way. Now, so therefore, since we are here in this world and trying to refine the world, to elevate the world, to make godliness be seen in the world, therefore we, the Jewish people, we have to we have to be involved in things relating to this physical world, in order to sift them, and to purify them. So the idea is that by us being in the world, and let's say we have a sandwich. Okay, so the sandwich is made with bread. Okay, so a person washes their hands before eating bread. They say al netilat yadayim. They said a blessing. Now they take the sandwich. They have some salt on the table. They say the bracha amotzi lechem min haaretz. They dip the bread in the salt, and they're eating the. So they've made two blessings already. The sandwich has to be of food which is kasher, whatever it is inside the sandwich. Which might be a lot of work to make sure that it is kosher food. And so there we have a transaction that the individual is involved with the physical world. And through the fact of being involved with the physical world, we are elevating that world. We are making it, instead of it being opaque to godliness, it's becoming more translucent, if not transparent, So godliness is being revealed in our daily life through the physical activities that we undertake, such as eating a sandwich, which is kosher, and making the right blessing, and so on. Now, so that's what we have to do. And from this we understand, if we look at it this way, that we shouldn't have vows. The Jerusalem Talmud on this point is quite right. Why should we have vows? Of course, the Jerusalem Talmud, all the Talmud, the Babylonian and the Jerusalem Talmud, they're all right. But it just in terms of the argument here, this establishes what the Talmud is saying. Why should we have vows? Because vows mean abstinence, not doing something, being more ascetic, right? Ascetic people, they don't indulge in this and they don't indulge in that, and they don't do this and they don't do that, right? So this whole concept of the ascetic, the person who doesn't enjoy anything, as the sages said, Nedarim siag leprishut. Vows are a fence around asceticism. In other words, vows are a step towards asceticism. I think that's a good way to translate this. Now, why? What's the problem of having vows? Because if we separate ourselves from permitted things, we are not able to sift them and purify them because we're not having anything to do with them. We're keeping away from them. So if the person decides he's not going to eat this sandwich, why not? Because the bread is fattening and the meat is indulgent. And so he's not going to have the bread. Let's say it's a meat sandwich, right? So he's not going to have the bread and he's not going to have the meat. And he'll just have a little bit of tomato and lettuce. But so he's not having any of this substantial sandwich. So therefore, we see the point of the question in the Jerusalem Talmud, why have vows? So another way of expressing this, that we should not be ascetic, as is known the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. And he said this teaching on a verse which he interpreted in this way. The verse, in its simple sense, is talking about a completely different situation, but the Baal Shem Tov explains it as being about our relation with the physical world. So he explained ala pasuk on the verse, Ki terecha mosanach. When you see the donkey belonging to the person you don't like, or the person who doesn't like ourselves. So, and he has a donkey, and the donkey is very heavily laden, and it's got so many burdens on it that the donkey is crouching down and it won't move. So what you have to do then is you come along, you see this person that you've had a lot of disagreements with, and they have a donkey, and the donkey is struggling and it's crouching on the ground and it can't get up. So it's a big mitzvah, which is expressed in this verse, to go over and help the owner take the burden off the donkey so the donkey can stand up healthily, and then you can load it up again in a more careful way that the donkey won't fall down. That's the basic mitzvah. Azov ta'azov imo. You should really help the owner of the donkey. Now, so what the Baal Shem Tov explains, that this is really talking to us. Now the donkey, chamor, that donkey is like our material aspect. Chamor is like the word chumriot, which means material, the material aspect. So this is the material aspect of our lives. Sheseda avodah, the real way of conducting service of God, eino ba'ofen shel shvirat hachomriyot, is not by way of breaking the material dimension. There are people and there are movements, let's say, where a person says, well, we've got to break this attachment to materiality, and you can't have this and you can't have that, and a fierce kind of negation of any kind of physical pleasure. There are ascetics in other religions, ascetics who do not marry, and supposedly are supposed to keep away from all pleasures of the flesh. So that's not a general Jewish concept. Ela adarabba, on the contrary, azov ta'azov imo, you've got to help him. And here the him is like the donkey itself, the materiality itself. You get involved with the materiality. That means our service of God has to be yachad im haguf, together with the body, v'nefesh ha'ba'amid, and the animal soul. Now the animal soul is full of desires for this and desires for that. So we have to relate to the animal soul, train it, indeed, not let it do things wildly, but we are trying to train it in a positive direction, to purify and to sift and to purify, that they too, the body and the animal soul, should ascend into the realms of godliness. In other words, to make our bodily appetites something sacred and spiritual, which means training them to respond to the material in a very careful and measured way, but nonetheless to remain physical beings. So the person eats the apple, the person has the food, he eats the sandwich, using our metaphor before, he makes the right blessings, he feels the right relationship with that piece of physical world that he is involved with. He knows that the energy in the sandwich is going to help him or her keep the Torah, to have the energy to pray, to study, to do good things. And so therefore, the life force which is in the sandwich is being elevated to godliness. And that's why the Torah, in other words, the Jerusalem Talmud said, it's enough for you what the Torah forbade. And a person should not impose further prohibitions, dvarim mutarim, of relating to things which are otherwise permitted. Kevan shetachlita kavana, since the real goal is beinyan haberurim, is with sifting the world in a proper way. And since that is what we're trying to do, you have to get involved with the world. You have to eat the sandwich, you have to do this, you have to do that, because by doing it in a refined and spiritual way, you're going to elevate. So that would look like, that could be understood as a kind of a pathway in life, that people, so to speak, do the things that everyone would imagine they're indulging themselves, but they're trying not to indulge themselves. They're doing it, but they're trying to do it in a more spiritual way. However, the story doesn't stop there, and so we have to read another few lines to understand exactly what this is teaching. Omnom, however, kol zeh hu ba'adam yashar holech. All this is with a person who has never messed up, a person who's going in the straight route and has never done anything wrong. He's walking on the straight path. Avami shechata, but someone who in the past sinned, ufagam, and made a flaw, va'ava et haderech, and he crossed off the path, he wandered off the path, like an aveira is a sin. There are a number of words for sin. One of them is aveira, which is like going off the route that we're supposed to be following. So this person that we're talking to now is the person who has lived a normal life, and unfortunately what often happens in a normal life is he sinned in this way and he sinned in that way and he did that wrong and the other thing wrong. Much of it to do with indulging this appetite, that appetite. And he can see in his own soul, he knows himself, and he can see in his own soul, he's not able to purify and sift this thing. So this thing, it's too heavy for him in moral terms. He can't deal with it. So therefore the advice which is given is, he separates himself, and he makes a vow saying, I do not want the pleasure of that thing. Even though the thing is permitted by the Torah, he decides, I am not going to have that thing. It's permitted, but I'm not going to have it. As the words of the previous Rebbe, there's a well-known saying. Here it is in Yiddish, and I'll translate. What one mustn't do, one mustn't do. But what one may do, one doesn't need it. Or another way of translating the last passage, you shouldn't do it. It's not. So there are different ways of saying you mustn't do it. You mustn't do it and you shouldn't do it. So, and another way of understanding it is you don't need it. Let's just see how they translate it into Hebrew. Yeah, there's a cute little Hebrew phrase. Sha'asur asur, what is forbidden is forbidden. Umasha mutar miyutar, and what is permitted is unnecessary. So that's that's the nice little Hebrew phrase expressing the same concept. So in other words, it's permitted, but we don't need it. Because the person's in such a situation, it means basically it's a normal person. It might be not only won't he not purify the food, but on the contrary, will draw him down below. We're not talking only about food, it could be any kind of pleasure, any kind of activity in which pleasure is in physical activity, where pleasure is involved. And the question is, do we do it or do we not do it? How do we do it? And so there is the danger of being dragged down below, and therefore, therefore the person has to separate himself from that, and say, right, forbidden, I can't do that, it's too much for me. Now, like the example that I suggested earlier on, imagine a person had drunk a lot of wine, got very drunk, done some terrible things, ended up in jail for a night, something like that, let's imagine. And he comes out and he says, finish, I am not getting drunk again. And he decides he's not going to touch, not wine, not whiskey, not vodka. He's not going to touch anything. So next time someone wants to offer him a l'chaim, he says, no, I'm very sorry, I don't have it. Okay, so like a person in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? He's had a terrible problem with alcohol. So now nothing, garnish. Even though the Torah says, you can make Kiddush on wine, make Havdalah on wine, say l'chaim in a Hasidic gathering and a Kiddush. But no, the person sees it's too dangerous for him, so he's not going to have it. So, so let's just discuss this and see if we can relate to these ideas. Are there any comments by anyone? Rabbi Lou, would you like to comment on what we've been exploring?
Everything's fine.
I have a question.
No special comment. Thank you.
I have a question. How do we know in what cases it's appropriate to take a neder and to make a additional prohibition, and when it's not appropriate because it's over the top, or we're told not to do it?
I think in practice, in daily life today, no one would advise you to actually make a neder, but it might be appropriate to decide, I'm not going to do that thing. So let's say the person who had the accident with getting drunk. So it is perfectly understandable that from now on he doesn't drink intoxicating drink. He might ask a Rav, what should I do about Kiddush and Havdalah, 4 cups of wine at the Seder? But in general, one can understand that. I don't think any rabbi would suggest to someone to make a neder. Once you make a neder, then there's a whole problem. The kind of nedarim that people worry about today are things that they've had some kind of general practice. And because they've had that general practice, that sort of counts as a sort of neder, an unconscious neder. And if they want to change that practice, so they have to have hatarat nedarim. They have to have a annulment of that. Rabbi Lu, would you like to comment on Shlomo's question?
Yeah, what you said is 100%. I believe that, and in many letters, the Rebbe writes to people when he says to do something or not to do something, not only something which is a deprivation of a pleasure, but I'll give tzedakah. The Rebbe says without a neder, chas v'shalom, not without a promise, it should be, even though it's a good thing, because when somebody says something, the whole Kol Nidre is the power of a speech of a person. It has a very special spiritual power, and you don't play around with it. On the other hand, without neder, there was an avoda, there was a divine service of iskafia, all the generations. In other words, of people being careful not to indulge in whatever it was in different ways. And the Rebbe has said, and I believe that it was even said in previous generation, but the Rebbe certainly said that in this, and I think in the name of maybe the previous Rebbe, but the Rebbe said many, many times that in our generation, that it used to be people would go without a meal once a week or whatever. The Rebbe says nowadays, that divine service is fulfilled not by depriving oneself, but by eating things that are healthy. He told somebody it was a bacha and he had a health problem, and he said, you must eat cake before you daven. So he said, it's too delicious. So the Rebbe said, if you want, you can put salt on it. But the idea was this boy was very ultra serious, probably, and was not eating and not getting necessary nutrients in his body. And the doctors say he has to eat. So nowadays, this particular character trait, where it's necessary to work on oneself, is more to train oneself. Whether Rebbe told somebody, leave over at the end of your plate something if you're concerned about, you want to, if something which is very tasty, so don't eat it to the last drop, to the last bite. Finding other ways, and and each person has to judge in. You have to be smart a little bit as well, not to impinge upon one's health, which will disturb other spiritual activities that you're supposed to be doing. If a person becomes too ascetic, as you call it, then they're not going to be able to daven or to learn Torah with the same energy that they would. On the other hand, they don't want to indulge, so make sure that what you're eating is a healthy diet as opposed to what you want to eat.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, that's it's not only a matter of physical health. The great problem with asceticism is the self-aggrandizement that this offers to the person. So there is a story about the Kotzker Rebbe, and apparently in the town of Kotsk there was an ascetic, and this ascetic fasted the entire week through. He only ate a proper meal on Shabbat, and otherwise I don't know how exactly he did it, but he fasted the entire week. So there were some little Jewish children making fun of this ascetic gentleman, and the Kotzker Rebbe came up and he said, "Children, don't make fun of this man. He fasts every Monday and Thursday." And the man corrected him, "You mean the whole week through?" So he was very proud that he was fasting the whole week through. And that's probably what the children saw and why they were making fun of him. So you know, the ascetic person says, and there's a beautiful letter by the previous Rebbe describing an ascetic, like another ascetic, you know, who is hugging himself at what a wonderful ascetic he is. He doesn't have this. People don't know what a great man he is and how clever he is and how learned. They think he's just an ordinary person, you know. So it's not only physical health. Asceticism can be very problematic for mental health, in a mental balance. Okay, any other comments? Right, okay.
Can I say something actually?
Yes, Rivka.
And you know, the Azov to Azov, you know, the imagery of the donkey is a very good one and very appropriate, I think, as well. So when you help the donkey and put the load again, you wouldn't put again the whole load, because then the donkey will collapse again. So what you're doing, you're dwindling by loading again and that's kind of,
Yeah. So you're doing it with more mitinut, more carefully.
yeah, selection and all. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, lovely.
You have less.
Okay, balance. Now the discussion is going to be broadened. We're moving from something which is just, you know, it could have been a discussion in halakha, it could have been a little passage in Talmud or the Code of Law. But now we're moving into these sort of the spiritual dimension. The inyan shnei ofanim ana. Now this concept of these two approaches, bichlalut ha'olamot, when we consider the worlds, the spiritual realms. Now here we're talking about the four Kabbalistic worlds. Atzilut, the world of emanation, which is the highest level, and but beyond, there is beyond Atzilut as well. There's the Ein Sof and other levels, Kabbalistic levels, but Atzilut is the world of emanation, and then you have the lower level, Bria, creation, Yetzira, formation, Asiya, action. So these two aspects, the person who is beyond any kind of problem, and therefore is able to partake fully in the physical world, and the ordinary person, for whom that is more difficult, because he might have once or twice or 100 times tripped over in one way or the other, so he has to be more careful. Now, those two aspects are also there. That's the huachiluk, that's the distinction. Shebein olam atzilut, between the world of atzilut, the world of emanation on the higher level, v'olamot bria, yetzira, asiya, and the lower levels of worlds. Kihinei olam atzilut, because the world of atzilut, the world of emanation, hu olam mevora, it's a world which is pure, it's sifted. Dichtiv beis, it says, Lo yugu chara, there's no evil at that level. V'nikra olam achdut, it's called the world of unity. Lefi shesham, because there, lo rak iyu v'chayu echad. You have the idea of radiance and vessels. The sfirot are radiance, and the radiance is within a vessel. So we've got the idea that the radiance, which is in the sfirot, bonds with the divine. So it's not only iyu v'chayu echad, he, God, and this life force is one, elegam iyu v'gamo echad, but also God and the vessels, not just the radiance, but the vessel, so to speak, this spiritual vessel, which the Kabbalists describe for each sfirah. There's the vessel and the radiance. The vessel in the world of Atzilut, in the world of emanation, is also one with the divine. So there, when it's one with the divine, everything is one. So there are no temptations. The physical world is there simply in order to do whatever needs to be done in the physical world. Whereas in the lower worlds, the worlds of creation, formation, and action, about which it says, Umisham yipared. From there, the river divides. This is like describing the Garden of Eden in the beginning of the Torah. So there's the river coming from the Garden of Eden, and then the river divides. Now, division is like Shesham Matchil Inyana Perut. From there begins division, like division from the holy. Va'ad l'mitziut shel ra, till it's not only divided, it's actually evil. Because even in the first of these three worlds, the world of creation, there's a little bit of bad there in some sense. And so therefore, in that lower level, that is the lower level. That's like the person who has to be careful. Whereas the higher level is the person who's beyond that need for care, because that person has reached a level that his or her desires are purely godly. They're godly desires. So if he wants something, he wants it because it's kosher and it's appropriate and it's right, and he doesn't have to worry about it. Whereas at a lower level, we might very well want something and it's not appropriate and it's not right and we shouldn't do it. So from this we understand that the concept of vows relates only b'madregat olamot b'riya yitzira asiya. The idea of vows only really relates to the lower world, the worlds of creation, formation, and action. But when we're talking about the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation, it's not necessary at all to have vows. And when we're talking about these vows, in terms of worlds, well, let's go into one of the worlds. Let's go into a world, and there are 10 sfirot. And when we consider the divine emanations, it's the distinction between the attribute wisdom and the attribute understanding. Wisdom is on a higher level and is very pure and is very connected with the divine, and understanding is on a lower level and is very closely related to all the manifold aspects which are in the physical material world. So that distinction between wisdom and understanding is also like Atzilut and the lower worlds, like the person who doesn't have to make vows and the lower person who, as I mentioned, we're not saying a person should make vows, but he or she has to be careful to measure very carefully what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. The Hinei Sfirat HaBina, because the attribute Bina, understanding, is the source of the downchaining of worlds. Even though Bina is higher than the other 7 sefirot, nonetheless, it connects with them. Because Bina, understanding, is the source of the 7 sefirot. And that's why that is a realm where there might be ambiguity and difficulty and temptation, and the whole concept of being very careful, which might express itself in a vow. I'm not going to get drunk again. I'm not going to take a single glass of vodka again. Whereas the quality of wisdom, that is higher, that's beyond the downchaining of worlds. As is known in the text, there are many texts and books and teachings about the nature of the Sefirah. In the attribute wisdom shines the radiance of the infinite. Since at that point, within that realm, you can feel that God alone is the Ein Zulato, and there's nothing apart from God. So when a person is absorbed at that level, they do not feel any kind of temptation to something inappropriate. And as far as the attribute wisdom is understood, it wouldn't happen that there is what is graphically described as the external forces coming along and sucking the life force from something. That's that's a kind of a graphic way that this is depicted, but that's not the case. In the case of Chokhmah, it's beyond that. Or Kmosh Katuv, as the verse says, Yamutu, they die, v'lo b'chokhmah, but without wisdom. In other words, dying, and dying in a moral sense, is below wisdom. It's lower than wisdom. Wisdom is on a higher level where that never takes place. Therefore, when we're speaking about wisdom, there cannot be there doesn't need to be there, the idea of vows. Okay, now, so we've spoken about this in terms of space. Now we're getting the same kind of distinction in terms of time. The same way that we have this distinction b'makom, in place, in space, which means like the worlds, the sefirot, it's spiritual space, but it's still space. Similarly, there's this distinction in time. That is the real difference between the weekdays, Yomim Tovim, festive days, V'Yom HaShabbat, and the Shabbat day. And what it's going to say is that Shabbat is higher than everything else, even than the festivals. So we've got Shabbat on a pedestal above, and everything else is below. Now what this means is, and that applies also to our whole relationship with the physical. The relationship with the physical on Shabbat is more harmonious, according to the Torah and Hasidic teaching. Our relationship with the physical is more harmonious and demands less self-restraint on Shabbat than any other time, even the time of the festivals. Now, what this means is, now it was explained in a previous discourse the Rebbe taught concerning this process of sifting. How is the sifting taking place? Now it's an interesting law not to sift on Shabbat. If there's a bowl of grapes and a few of the grapes are moldy, you can't take off those moldy grapes and throw them away in order to make the bunch of grapes in the bowl look nicer, because that's called birur. One is taking the negative from the positive, and one isn't supposed to do that on Shabbat. So there's the idea of sifting as regards psolet, which means the refuse, something that one is going to throw away, like the moldy grapes. Now, there are different ways of doing the sifting. The way I just described is taking the unwanted from the food, taking the refuse from the food. But there's another way of sifting where you've got, let's say, some nice grapes, and many of them are moldy. You pick out the nice grapes. So now that's a different thing. You're taking the positive food and leaving behind the refuse. So, the idea of sifting is what the weekday work is all about. And that's why we are not allowed to sift on Shabbat, because on a weekday, we are trying to find the holy dimension within everything that we are in contact with. Omnam, however, Gam Yomim Tovim, even on a festival, there is a certain level of sifting which is permitted on a festival, but there is this idea, in other words, that there's a possibility of something very negative about the festival. Now that's a striking idea, and it's something that comes up in the Zohar. It's based on a verse, Kamoshe Katuv Peresh. It's a verse in Malachi, Peresh Chagechem, the refuse of your festivals. Now, this is refuse like animal droppings. So the refuse of your festival, very harsh term. In other words, a festival that's got in it the possibility of self-indulgence, of doing things which are not appropriate, right? Festivals are relaxed time, people go for walks, the boys go here, the girls go there, then somehow or other they all mix together, right? It's so that's like it's a famous thing, the rabbis of Eastern Europe and earlier trying to get people to behave on festivals because all kinds of hanky-panky was taking place in the community when there was this relaxed atmosphere. No one was working, but everyone was taking a little bit extra wine, a little bit extra this, and a little bit extra that. As the way, the simple law, Shesimchat Yom Tov, the joy of the festival, tzricha liyot ba'ofen, has to be in such a way, we have to see a festival as an opportunity to give hospitality and help to the proselyte, the orphan, the widow, imsha aniyim, and other poor people. It says, you should rejoice in your festival. You, and the verse goes on, you and and the proselyte, the stranger, the orphan, the widow, asher b'sharecha, in your gates. And if we don't support these less established people, about this it says, terrible verse, I will smear filth on your face, peresh chagechem, the filth of your festival. So in other words, the festival, which should be a very spiritual opportunity, could be something very different. The code of law says the Bet Din has to make kind of local police around the community on the festivals. They should be wandering around the community looking at what people are doing, so that the joy of the festival should be in appropriate ways and not inappropriate ways. Now, the reason for this, Kabbalistically, is because the source of the festival comes from the Sfira Bina, the Sfira understanding. So remember, we had the distinction, wisdom and understanding. So the festival is from the Sfira understanding. Because the festivals are times of joy. And it says about joy, Ema banim smecha, the mother of the children is joyful, and the mother of the children is a kind of code word for the sphira bina, for that attribute understanding, and the children are like the other sphira, kindness, severity, and so on. Shezoi madregat olam habriya. Now that is the realm of the world of Briya, and so there we have a possibility of negativity. So that's so there we have we're missing out a line or two, and so since Bina is the source of the down chaining of the world, there can be the negative kind of subtling of bringing the energy of Bina in the wrong place. However, higher than Bina, higher than the festivals, Ulamaylam is higher than that, who Yom HaShabbat. Is Shabbat, and Shabbat Shubkinat Mochin Da'aba. Shabbat relates to Sphira Chochma, looked at in its more Kabbalistic way, B'china Shalamayim Ishtalshlu, a level which is higher than the down chaining of the world. Shabazeh, and at that level, Lo Shayachin in Absolet, there's no refuge. Shazer Mashikatu, Perish Chagechim Dafta. That's why it says the refuse of your festivals, and it doesn't say Peresh Shabbatchem, the refuse of your Shabbat. But Achem Shabbat mitzvah la'ango, and therefore on Shabbat it's a mitzvah to make it delightful by achila and shtiyah, by eating and drinking. Va'ad shafilu sheina b'Shabbat Talmud. Even we say that sleeping on Shabbat is a delight. And all other physical aspects are there on Shabbat in a very wholesome way. Because on Shabbat there cannot be this inappropriate and negative sucking away of life force. Uchlalut avodat b'Shabbat, and the general service of Shabbat, einu b'inyan haberurim, isn't with the sifting, sheshayich ben psolet, in which there is refuse, because shahare b'Shabbat borer asur, on Shabbat we're not allowed to do that sifting. Eina ha'avodah Shabbat al derech ma shekatuv, the way we serve God on Shabbat is like it says, v'achaltem achol, you should eat and be happy. Because then you're separating food from food, which is not the forbidden category of separation at all. And from this we can understand also in Yana Moadot Yana Hanadarim. This is how the festivals relate to the vows. Bina, because in Bina, Sheshami Madregat HaMoadot, which and Bina, understanding that is the level of the festivals, Shayach Gam Inyan Hanadarim, the vows apply, because Bina is a level at which we have to be careful. So therefore there are vows. And since the festivals they have to do with Bina, and the festivals have this ambiguous dimension that people may behave inappropriately on festivals. So after the long section about festivals in last week's Sedra comes this week's Sedra about vows, reminding us that on a festival we have to be careful. So now, Achal Pizeh, however, according to this, Sarich Lavin, we have to understand a further point. Why did Moshe speak to the leaders of the tribes and tell them all the rules about the vows? According to what we explained, vows apply on the lower level. As we said, the realm of understanding, which is the source of the down chaining of worlds. And in the realm of Briya, Yetzirah, Asiyah, the lower levels of these Kabbalistic worlds. There might be separation and hiding of God. And in the service of the Jewish people, the whole idea of vows is only when a person sees with self-knowledge, he sees he can't deal with this thing. He can't get drunk again. He mustn't touch vodka or whiskey. And from this we understand שעניין הנדרים שייך יותר לאנשים פשוטים. The vows relate to ordinary people. שמצד פתיחות מדרגתם, because they're on a sort of a lower level spiritually and intellectually, צריך להיות אצלם עניין של פחישות. They have to be careful, they have to separate from the desires of life around them. So if im kain, and if so, if vows are about ordinary people, why is this section said specifically to the leaders of the tribes? And they're on a higher level. Like the elders who are on the level of Moses in certain ways. As it says, in our chapter, about I will give the spirit which is on you, and I'll put it on them. Now for Moshe, this level of wisdom, the idea of vows do not apply. So we've got the ordinary people and we've got Moshe. So for Moshe, there's no such thing as vows. For the ordinary people, there is. Why, therefore, is Moshe telling this to the leaders of the tribes? And why is it specially saying that? But the answer is, the main meaning of this chapter, the chapter isn't really telling us about vows. It's telling us something very different. It's telling us about annulling vows. Because ideally, looked at from the point of view of Torah, there shouldn't be the idea of vows, because people should have a harmonious relationship with physicality. They shouldn't have an ambiguous, like tense, problematic relationship with it. Physicality should be easy, 1, 2, 3. And that's why this section was said to the leaders of the tribes today, as we learned from the Rashi, that one distinguished elder, he is able to annul vows, in order that these leaders, they should bring into effect the annulment of vows. And an annulment can take place through a sage. He uproots the vow from the very beginning. That means these leaders, this is describing what a Jewish leader is supposed to be, that they should have the effect that so called Bnei Israel for the rest of the Jewish people, that they should ascend to a higher level, that the vows will be unnecessary for them. They won't need them. In other words, the leader has to lift up those he's guiding and bring them to a spiritual place where they are beyond the need for vows, that they're able to have a healthy and connected relationship with physicality and the whole conflicted dimension that's left behind. That's what the ideal leader is supposed to be, according to this. And it's the leader who is somehow able to pull this off. And that whole idea, that it's the sage who annuls the vow, means something forbidden, tied down, becomes permitted and untied. Is because of the power of the radiance of the infinite in the quality of wisdom, which is called the quality of severity in Atik, which is the inwardness of Keter. This is like Kabbalistic language. And because he's got this quality, he is able to annul vows of other people. Also, if you don't have one distinguished sage, you can have 3 ordinary people. And that means it explains in the prayer book with Hasidic teachings the idea that 3 people, now when you sit down to bench and there's 3 people, there's an extra quality. So therefore, those 3 people, they've got this extra quality, this extra power. And we're missing out a little bit there because it'll take too long. And according to this, Yesh la'osif, now we can add, considering the way in which our Parshat HaMoadot, the section all about the festivals in last week's Sedra, comes next to Parshat Nedarim, comes next to the section on vows, because in the verse, Eile ta'asu l'Hashem, this is what you should do for God on your festivals, apart from the vows, Murumas HaKesher v'Shaychut, it's hinting at the connection shebein moadim nedarim, between festivals and vows, shezeu lefi, which that's because shnei mibchinat bina, they both come from the level of bina, of understanding. The festival is from the level of bina, and the vows are from the level of bina. Shemisham yichola liyot yenika, and that's why you need the vows, because from that level of bina there could be a sucking going away to a negative force. But and that's why we need a little bit of asceticism at that point. And after that comes the section on vows in our Sedra. And the main thing about what is written in our Sedra, albeit it doesn't say it so much, it talks about a father and a husband annulling the vow of the wife, the daughter, but the main thing is this whole concept of annulling vows. It comes from the quality wisdom, which is higher than understanding. Like Shabbat, which is higher than a festival. Till we come to the absolute great exaltation of the Shabbat day, the day which will always be Shabbat, the day which will always be peace for the life of the world. And that is a beautiful point to end. Okay, are there any comments or questions? Rabbi Lou, a comment?
Very beautiful. Thank you very much for the presentation and for the whole year. This is the final in this series.
Thank you.
Chazak when it's chazak.
Amen. All right. Thank you. As mentioned in the email, this is the last of our sessions this season. And we're traveling, doing a lot of traveling with the help of God. And so we meet again the 5th of September. Bezrat Hashem. So all the very best.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a
Joy.
good summer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thanks. All the best to everyone.
Thank you. Have a good holiday.
Thanks very much.
Yes. Have a great holiday.
Yeah, everyone have a good summer.
Amen.
Bye.
Bye.